Kazakhs, of course, were Turkic speakers, unlike the Halkha Mongols. And did they have a religious difference also from the Mongols?
Yes, the Kazakhs in Mongolia, in Chinese Turkestan, in the Soviet Union were all nominally Muslims, but their Islam was very thin. For one thing, as nomads, they didn't have fixed centers with mosques, and consequently they did not have a clergy with a vested interest in landed property. And this is very different from the strong economic, political, social position of the Buddhist monasteries among the Mongols.
Were there other changes or other differences between the Mongols and the Kazakhs that you could associate with this, with the lack of a clergy?
No, but besides the lack of a clergy, the lack in pre-revolutionary days of a territory of their own, they also had no hereditary aristocracy.
You were talking earlier about education. How would you see education affecting social relations in general, perhaps relations between parents and children or between men and women, if it has done, in present-day Mongolia?
In present-day Mongolia, education, of course, is as open to women as it is to men, to girls as well as to boys. Everywhere you begin with a primary school. Out in the country, in the collectives, each collective will have a school, and those who live at the collective center send their children to school on foot every day. From a bit farther off, they ride in on horseback or sometimes on camels. From still farther away, they're brought by bus, and from still farther away, some are brought to board at the school. Education with Russian as a second language begins fairly early. I couldn't tell you exactly what age. Then on beyond that, let me see. From every standard that they're aiming at is 10 years of school for every child. That is above the from 8 or 9 to 18 or 19. Most of a large part of the country reached 8 years, but more and more are reaching the 10-year standard. After that, entry to the university or one of the specialized higher schools is by competitive examination.
And people who are educated at school, are they happy to go on leading the sort of semi-nomadic life of a herdsman in a collective, or does a large majority of them want to go on to live in the city and work in?
I should say the large majority get city jobs. But I remember once we were driving in a jeep, and I said to my traveling companion, look, there's a tent over there with mares tethered beside it. Let's go and ask for a bowl of mare's milk. So fine, we went along there. The family was a member of a collective, but they were old-fashioned. I think it was the only tent in which I saw Buddhist holy pictures still hanging in the tent. And there was a boy there, about 16 years old, and I said, what are you going to do when you leave school? He said, I'm going to go to Irkutsk, that's in Siberia, and do a year or two of veterinary science. I don't want to become a professional veterinary. I just want to learn enough about it so that later I will know if there's trouble in my herd, the animals I'm herding, whether I can handle it myself or whether I should send for the vet. He said, and then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to be the best damn herdsman in this part of Mongolia.
And for assessing who is the best herdsman in this bit of Mongolia, how do they have competitions, or how does that work?
They do, and they and exactly how the competitions are held, or whether it's done partly simply from the records, the account books of the collective, you know, how many successful births of sheep and calves and that kind of thing. But every year they have a sort of parade performance in Ulaanbaatar, to which the best shepherds from all parts of Mongolia are summoned to the capital and have little medals pinned on them. I remember once traveling, we'd been out in the far west of the country, but the grapevine must have been working, because on the way back we met a lorry that was stuffed with people, and when they saw us they stopped and we stopped, and my traveling companion jumped out, and from the lorry that jumped down another man who was the brother companion.
I believe your Mongolian companion for many years and friend was Arash.
Yes.
Could you tell us something about him?
Yes. Arash was a Daktin, a name which means borderer, and his people were just that. They had been stationed on the border between the northern and the western Mongols, and their dialect was more Western Mongol than Khalkh. Arash had come down to Inner Mongolia in a rather curious way. He had an elder brother who was a Lama shaman, and this elder brother had accompanied a celebrated counter-revolutionary, a Kalmuk by origin, named Dambi Jansen, who was hoping to overthrow the revolution and had fled down into Inner Mongolia and was bumped off by a commando sent down from Ulaanbaatar. And Arash was afraid that because his brother had been connected with this prominent counter-revolutionary, he himself would get into trouble. He was very unpolitical, and he fled down into Inner Mongolia. So did his elder brother, whom I never met. But the elder brother several times got into trouble because as a Lama shaman, he would work himself up into a frenzy and to drive out the evil spirit that was making somebody sick. He boasted that he could drive a knife into the body of the sick man and expel the spirit. And once or twice he killed people by doing this, which somewhat increased his fame but diminished his popularity. Arash himself was a nominal Lama, but like many such nominal Lamas, not living in a monastery, he had a girlfriend, not a legal wife, but a girlfriend, and a charming little daughter. I used to visit them when I went up to the plateau before Arash and I would take off for a further journey.
And this girl could look after herself, as you said. Mongol women are capable of
well, no, the girl was too small for that.
The wife, I meant.
The wife, yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. They only had 2 or 3 animals, and Arash, when I wasn't there, earned his living doing odd jobs and so forth. When I went back to Peking, I would leave my 4 camels with him, and they were always perfectly safe. He was utterly trustworthy.
And you paid him to help you on your...
Yes.
Yes.
But that was very Mongol. When I went up for my first interview with him, I'd heard about him because he had worked with the Svenhedin expedition. And when I went up for my first interview with him, he was obviously just the right man, just what I needed. And so I said, that's good. Now I'll take you on. Wait a minute, he said. Don't be in such a hurry. I want to ask you a few questions to see whether I want to be taken on by you.
What sort of questions did he ask you?
I forget now, but the general drift of them was that he was a camel man, and he would be responsible for the camels and that end of the traveling, but he was not a personal servant.
Yes.
And this was very valuable for me. I'm at home in several cultures, and I've lived more of my life outside my own country than inside it. In fact, I'm writing my memoirs under the general title of Happiness Among Strangers. But in all of these cultures, I've been in a sort of upper middle class position and so forth. And the Mongolian culture is the only one that I have entered at the worker level, and that was due to Arash. Because when we were in camp, I would do the crude, unskilled labor while he did the skilled things and so on. But I worked at a level which enabled me to see Mongolian life and culture from the level of the working class, the former serfs and so on.
Would you say that despite the fact that in Mongolia there's an honorific language, or there used to be, of respect for aristocrats and lamas and so on, nevertheless it's rather an egalitarian kind of society in many ways?
In many ways, yes. well, it's not exactly a ceremonial language, but a collection of ceremonial phrases and so on. And these were as well known among the common people as they were among aristocrats.
And used by them as well,
amongst
themselves.
As well, yes.
Perhaps you could now tell us about an aristocrat who I know that you knew De Wang from.
Yes. The Chinese form of his name was De Wang, Wang meaning prince, and De being an abbreviation of his Mongol name, which was Demtruk Dongrup. Like many Mongol names, Tibetan by origin. He was the leader of the Inner Mongolian, non-Marxist, non-communist nationalist movement. But he was a pure nationalist, and later, when Inner Mongolia was under Japanese occupation, he had working for him a number of young men whom he knew to be concealed communists, but he never turned them over to the Japanese. His attitude was, if I have somebody who's willing to work for Mongolian independence, then I don't care about his other political affiliations or sympathies.
Were the people primarily from his own people, or did he gather all sorts of Mongols from all kinds of
He gathered Mongols from all over Inner Mongolia, and he set up schools, and in all the history of Inner Mongolia, there never had been so many young people becoming literate and alive to the modern world as they were under De Wang.
Was he at the same time a Buddhist? I mean, did he combine Buddhism with a modernizing kind of attitude, or was he not really very religious?
No, he was like an upper class Anglican, nominally a member of the Church of England, but beyond going to church once every so often, not having it weigh too heavily on him.
And what were his political aims, and how did he think of?
Well, his political aim was that he did not want to detach Inner Mongolia from China. Still less did he want Inner Mongolia to fall into the hands of the Japanese. But he did want autonomy, and the Mongols of Inner Mongolia to manage their own taxation, education, things like that. And the Chinese would not help him or back him, the Chiang Kai-shek Chinese. And the Chinese communists, of course, also had it in for him because he was not under their control.
And what sort of support did he have? Did he take taxes from some people, or was he given contributions?
He was given contributions. He had to move very carefully because princes, Inner Mongolian princes who were far more conservative than he, were a bit distrustful of his modernizing, and were more likely to make deals either with Chinese provincial governors or with the Japanese.
And would you see that as the reason for his ultimate failure, really?
Yeah, ultimately, when the Japanese surrendered, and then Chiang Kai-shek was being defeated, he tried to evade the problem by escaping into independent Mongolia, but the Mongols at that stage did not want to quarrel with a China which had newly come under the power of a communist party, and so they returned him to Inner Mongolia. The Chinese communists tried him as a traitor because he had been under Japanese control during most of the war, sentenced him to death, but commuted that to a life sentence. Ultimately, he was released, and in his last years, he worked as the librarian of the great Mongol library, which he himself had created in the Inner Mongolian library. I think he was a very fine man, an honest man, perfectly straight, and I've always felt honored that he considered me not as a foreign expert on things Mongol, but as a friend.
How would you compare his role with that of Ulan Fu, the more recent Inner Mongolian nationalist leader?
Well, Ulan Fu, his name is an interesting marker right at the beginning. Russian names ending in "of," the Chinese transliterate as Fu. So, and they wrote his name. See, in Mongol, his name was written as Ulan Hu. Ulan meaning red, and Hu being short for Hubagan child, red child. Red child in both Mongol and Chinese is a term of endearment for a newly born infant. But Ulan Fu is an obvious echoing of Ulyanov, the name of Lenin, the real name of Lenin. And but he was in his student days in Peking, he was able to get by with this because the Chinese were not onto it. But he came from the Tumat, or comes from the Tumat of Hukhot, the old Guihua, and they are settled Mongols. They've been settled and agricultural for a long time, and in his period of student and early political activities, he didn't even know any Mongol. Most of those Tumets have lost their Mongol and speak only Chinese. Later on, he made a real effort to learn Mongol, but he never became fluent in it.
So his political success was perhaps due to him being somewhat in between the Chinese and the
His political
Mongols.
success was the fact that his entry into Marxism and then into the Chinese Communist Party was a desirable acquisition for the Chinese Communist Party because he could be exhibited as a representative of one of China's minorities who was an enthusiastic member of the Chinese Communist Party.
And then he had a period of some eclipse, and he's now quite prominent again, isn't that
Yes.
so? Yes.
In the 1960s, like many other senior communists, he was eclipsed, and he was accused of this and that and so on, but he's now been rehabilitated and reinstated.
Could we perhaps go on now to another Mongolian who was also a friend of yours for many years, the Dilawahutucht?
Ah, yes. He was a marvelous man. A Mongol friend brought him in to see me at our house in Peking. That's how I first met him. Gradually, he repeated the visits, and we became close friends. He was a so-called living Buddha, a Buddhist reincarnation from Western Mongolia. He was well educated, especially better educated in Tibetan than in Mongol. He was a genuinely pious and observing Buddhist. He really believed in it, and unlike many high lamas, he didn't break any rules. He didn't smoke, he didn't drink, he didn't have women, and many of them did. Also, in pre-revolutionary Mongolia, high lamas were frequently appointed to important political and administrative duties, and he was made correspond to be Governor General of the Uliastai region in the Altai. And because of that, he met most of the great men of his time in the 20s and 30s. Then, in the 1930s, when the purges began, he was arrested and accused of doing intelligence work for the Japanese. After a trial, which he describes in his autobiography, he was given a suspended sentence and told to go home. And on the way home, he and one disciple who accompanied him edged down closer and closer to the inner Mongolian frontier and finally nipped across. And so he was in Inner Mongolia as a refugee. Because of his importance and dignity, he became a close friend of the Derwang that we've been talking about. And he was perhaps the father figure of the Khalkha refugees who at one time streamed into Inner Mongolia in considerable numbers. When I came back to China, when the Japanese occupied Peking, they got hold of him. And they took him to Japan and toured him around and had him honored at various Japanese Buddhist monasteries and so forth, and tried to make him into a Japanese puppet. But he evaded that. When he got back to China, he managed to get down to Shanghai, and with the help of a Chinese Buddhist, he got from Shanghai to Hong Kong. From Hong Kong, he got to Chongqing. And I found him there in 1941 when I went to Chongqing to work as advisor to Chiang Kai-shek. And Chiang Kai-shek allowed him to come and live with me in the quarters allotted to me as the Generalissimo's advisor. It was a real lifesaver because we could sit and talk to each other in Mongol as if it were a secret language, which in fact it was, because nobody around us, nobody with whom we were in touch, knew a word of Mongol. After the Japanese surrender, he got down to Hong Kong, from there by sea to Calcutta, and went from Calcutta up to Tibet, where he soon became an intimate of the entourage of the then still infant Dalai Lama. And then the Tibetans sent him back into China to to make a report on what was going on in China, what was likely to happen, what was coming out of the Civil War, and all that kind of thing. He was in Peking when Chiang Kai-shek collapsed, and I got a letter from him through an American friend telling me that Chiang Kai-shek was done for and he was going back to Tibet. So I wrote to him and said, on your way to Tibet, instead of going this time round by sea to India, I can arrange for you to fly to America and come and visit me and my family here. You see, my son was, well, the equivalent of being his godson, and the two were very, very fond of each other. And I said, you must come and see your godson. So he did come, and he stayed on and became a most valued member of the Mongolian seminar that I was then running at Johns Hopkins University. After my wife and I came to England in 1963, he went up and stayed with American friends in New York. Then it was discovered that he had cancer, and my son wrote to me that he was dying and knew he was dying, but said that I will hold on if your father can come to New York and see me for a last time. So I flew to New York. He was still alive, very weak, but fully in command of himself. And so I went on from New York late that afternoon to see my son up in New England, but the Diloa died before I could get back to New York the next day. Now, together with my Japanese colleague Fujiko Isono, I published at the end of last year a book on the life and times of the Diloa. The proper pronunciation of his name is Dilop Otocht, and that contains his political memoirs, and we've reproduced his original manuscript of that in the old Mongol script with our translation of it. Then another section of the book is his autobiography, because I thought of a good dodge. I said to him to get properly reacquainted with your godson. You must tell him the story of your life. So we had session. My son was then still at school, but in his school holidays he would come down and we would have sessions. And the old Dilop would sit cross-legged on the floor. My son and I sat on the sofa, and he would tell me. He told the two of us the story of his life. Now he was speaking in Mongol, which my son couldn't understand. So he would talk until I held up my hand, and then he would stop while I did a rapid. In those conditions you can't do a precise translation, but I would give a rapid paraphrase of what he had said to my son, who wrote it down in English. Then we would do the next take in Mongol and back into English and so on. And then a third part of the book is from a paper he wrote in Mongol and I translated for presentation to the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia. And this section gives a description of his monastery, its history, its institutions, and so on in Mongolia, and is accompanied by his own map of the monastery and its territory, drawn by him from memory.
As a living Buddha, how did he spend his days? I mean, what would a day be like? Did he meditate?
Well, I've never spent a day with a high Buddhist prelate in his monastery, so I can't tell you in detail. But I know that he always combined a highly active secular life with his religious duties and observances. And in the autobiographical section of this book, for example, he describes frequent visits to various princes and so on. And then, as I told you, he held a high administrative office at one time. But I don't think that his version of meditation was the kind of thing that you find among rather pseudo-Zen people in Europe and America. But he knew various prayers, always in Tibetan, which he would sit and mutter quietly to himself. He observed various hours and special days of prayer and church day observance, and that was about it. You see, one thing which was a great weakness of the Buddhist Church in Mongolia when politics began to speed up was the fact that the Church and its observances were closely tied to the Tibetan language, which was not understood by the multitude, and religious ceremonies in temples and monasteries were displays at which the common people came to wonder and be impressed. But there was no systematic teaching of the religion to the laity. There was no such thing as a sermon forming part of a religious observance. It was all something apart from the people. And they were supposed to be faithful, be humble, to respect, and so forth, but not to expect to understand.
Before he died, did he talk to you about his reincarnation?
He said several times, not in his last illness, but several times previously, he said there would be no reincarnation.
Was there any reason for that?
I never tried to inquire into that. In fact, he said to me more than once, you are a trusted and beloved friend, but you have the kind of mind that will never understand religion. So it's no use talking to you about religion.
Could I finally ask you about another friend of yours, who's alive now, the Mongolian historian Dalai?
Oh yes, he's a very interesting phenomenon of what I've mentioned before, the combination of change with continuity. His family, before they joined the collective, had been relatively prosperous, and his father had been able to start him on an education. Then he was enthusiastic about the revolution, became a, what do they call it, pioneer, young communist league and that sort of thing, finally joined the party. And in the 1950s, during the period of good and close relations with China, he was sent down to China, where he took a degree in Chinese, in a Chinese university, and came back to Mongolia as a China expert. But today, he is the head of the one of the Far Eastern sections of the Academy of Sciences. Now, his father, although a prosperous man, had also been, even before the revolution, a progressive man, interested in the independence and development of Mongolia. He had been one of the founders of the local cooperative, which later became the local collective, and so on. He tried to be as Marxist as he could. But Dalai told me that when he came back after 4 or 5 years in China, and in all that time he'd never been able to make a visit home, when he finally did get home, his father said to him, your horse, the horse that I gave to you when you reached puberty, which is an old Mongol custom. He said, that horse died while you were down in China. I didn't write to tell you about it because I didn't want to distress you. But I did the right thing. I took the horse's body out on the steppe and left it there for the vultures and the wolves and the foxes to clean it, to eat all the flesh. Then I cleaned the skull and I took the skull up to that mountain there, and I laid it safely on a ledge of stone. And tomorrow I will tell you how to get there, and you must go there and do him honor. Which, as a combination of revolution and tradition, is really it's a very Mongol story in Mongolia today.
As a contemporary Mongolian historian, what kind of questions would interest Dalai? What sort of thing does he write about?
He has written probably the best book in any language on China under Mongol rule in the Yuan dynasty. And that is based principally on the Yuan Shi, the history of the Yuan or Mongol dynasty. He doesn't do much in the way of separate papers, because for some years he has been so much occupied with administrative work in building up his institute.
And his life today, would he share something of the continuity you've talked about with the Mongolian culture?
He's very much interested in old traditions, folklore, legend, epics, and so on, and poetry.
And so he goes out to the countryside and lives in the yurts and so on. And is he encouraging that kind of work amongst his... in
the academy everybody encourages that.
Which is not something that in the West we associate with communist
No.
history departments.
But one thing for which I'm very grateful is that every time I go to Mongolia, they will hold seminars to which I'm invited, and everybody gives an account of his current research work and so forth, and then we select a theme and we all discuss it. And well, the head of the Historical Institute is Natsuk Dorj, whom you also know. And on one of my recent visits, we had a history seminar, and the question of nomadic feudalism came up. And they said various things about it. Of course, this is being very much discussed among Marxists at the present time. And so I said, well, the way you have set out this theme is extremely interesting. It's logical, it's consistent, but there are certain data, certain aspects of the problem that you haven't considered at all. That may be because you have already considered it and decided that it's not important enough, in which case I should like to know your reasons. But in the meantime, it occurs to me that really in connection with feudalism, we ought to discuss such and such and such. I paused, and Natsuk Dorj slapped the table in front of him, and he said, "There you go again, Lattimore. You're always coming up with ideas which we as Marxists cannot accept. But you manage to put them in such an interesting way that they have to be discussed. So keep it up," he said. "We like it." Which is a form of compliment from Marxists that one doesn't always get.
Owen, if you were starting out today, what do you think would be the most exciting thing to study in Mongolia, or in the area of the world you've been concerned with?
I think I would like to do something about the place in world history of the great Mongol conquests. You see, at the present time, the Soviet historians treat Genghis Khan and the Mongol conquests as a purely destructive phenomenon. The Chinese, on the other hand, say that Genghis Khan established security on the trade routes between Central Asia and the West. And along these trade routes, the beneficent influence of Chinese civilization was able to flow to the Western barbarians. So there is a constructive and laudable side to Genghis Khan and the Mongol conquests. Well, of course, these two different views get all tangled up with Sino-Soviet quarrels about other things. But to put it at this moment in a very simple form, yes, Genghis Khan terrorized a large part of the world. But the evil that he did was no invention of his. It was part of the pattern of the time. That was the way people fought in those days. That was the way in which rule was imposed and so on. And to treat him as if he were the unique destroyer is a distortion of history. And there are other things. Of course, the official Soviet and the official Mongol stand is that in the period of tribal warfare, in which Chinggis put an end to the tribal organization and imposed a new feudal structure, this was historically an advance, and it was constructive and laudable. It was only when he turned away from Mongolia to foreign conquests that he became a negative phenomenon and a destroyer, not a creator, and so on. I think that this is far too crude a division of his life and career. I think other things should be taken into consideration.